He's not kidding, people.
I hope you enjoyed your lunch and that the service matched or exceeded your expectations. And again, thank you, Mr. David. The wine, I am told, was fantastic. Bob Brown, sitting in the back of the room, who makes sure that I can be heard, said it's the finest Cabernet he has tasted in years. He'll be at your car as you leave. Time for headlines. Very good year. A year everyone in this room can most likely recall. Many of us were even working in those days. Average salary was $11,800. The Dow Jones closed over 1,000 for the very first time. A gallon of gas cost 55 cents. An ounce of gold would set you back $60. The year was 1972. Our newscaster, KGO and KTVU alum Jim Vargas, and from KKHI, KQED, and the Armed Forces Radio Network, Mr. Fred Kroc.
Good afternoon, I'm Jim Vargas.
And I am Fred Kroc.
Voice of God.
Do it here? Okay, in politics? Yep. In politics, the word of the year was Watergate. After 2 failed attempts in May, 5 White House operatives were finally successful in burglarizing the office of the Democratic National Committee in the Watergate apartments in the nation's capital.
In the aftermath of that event, politicians the world over shook their collective heads when incumbent President Richard Nixon defeated Democratic opponent George McGovern to win re-election in what was reported as the lowest voter turnout since 1958.
The 1972 Winter Olympics were held in Sapporo, Japan. It was the first time the games were held outside Europe or North America.
The Summit Games were held in Munich and will be remembered for the 11 Israeli athletes murdered by Arab terrorists. No one will ever forget Jim McKay's immortal words. They are all gone now.
In other international news, Okinawa has returned to Japan after 27 years as a military-occupied land. U.S. military-occupied land. However, Wake Island became a non-incorporated U.S. possession under the administration of the Air Force.
Back at home, Americans mourned the death of former President Harry Truman in Kansas City, Missouri, the day after Christmas, 1972.
America was still in the space exploration business that year as Mariner 9 sent back pictures from Mars, and the Pioneer 10 was launched from Cape Kennedy, the first man-made satellite to leave our solar system.
Apollo 17, America's last moon mission, marked the end of the Apollo program. The last man to walk on the moon did so in 1972. He was astronaut Gene Cernan.
In business, one car became the most popular vehicle ever sold, beating out the popularity of the Model T Ford. Total sales for the year were 15,700,000, and 34 were something called the Volkswagen Beetle.
Remember that. 1972 was the year a new industry sprang up in the Bay Area's Silicon Valley, when Nolan Bushnell started a company called Atari, featuring a game called Pong.
Science pushed forward in 1972 with development of the first artificial heart. According to broadcast statesman Mickey Lukoff,
You gotta read it before you read it.
the most demanded surgery of choice for broadcast executives residing east of the Hudson, west of the Hudson, east of the Hudson, both directions.
In other bean counter news, the first handheld calculator was introduced this year by Hewlett-Packard. Known as the HP 35, it cost $395. An equal quality calculator in 1910 could be had for, $1.98.
Best-selling books of 1972 may sound familiar. In fiction, they included The Winds of War, Semi-Tough, Captains and Kings, The Odessa File, and Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
In nonfiction, I'm okay, you're okay. Dr. Diane, Dr. Atkins' Diet Revolution, and Jim Shock's favorite, The Joy of Sex. Jim reports that he has just finished chapter 3 and is enjoying it more than he should.
3 more chapters, you get a partner, Jim. Movies released in 1972 include The Godfather, Dirty Harry, The Last Picture Show, Fiddler on the Roof, and A Clockwork Orange.
Academy Awards went for Best Pictures, The Godfather. Best Actor, Brando. Best Actress, any guesses? Liza Minnelli for Cabaret. And Best Actor, Best Director, Bob Fosse for Cabaret.
Depending upon your taste, 1972 broadcasting may or may not have been a banner year. For one thing, the first cable subscription service was launched, something called HBO. On regular TV, the biggest new show hit was MASH. And besides Lucy, there was The Brady Bunch and Hawaii Five-0.
In other broadcast news, Arthur Godfrey Time ended its 27-year run on radio. It was rumored at this time that singer Julius La Rosa hurt his hands applauding for 4 hours straight.
On the TV side, a rising comedian whose routines included the character Al Sleep, the hippy-dippy weatherman, was arrested after a performance in which he stated loudly and clearly the 7 words you can't say on television. His name, George Carlin.
Home recorders capable of television shows were introduced in 1972. They came in 2 flavors, VHF and Betamax. The latter format committed Harry Carey in less than 2 years. I wonder about the veracity of that statement.
Broadcast Legends headlines are written, produced, and written by Mr. Jim Schock, who certifies no carbon footprint was generated in their creation. I'm Jim Vargas.
And I'm Fred Kroc. Stay tuned for our regular programming.
Oh, dear. Thank you both. And a special thank you to our resident scribe, Mr. Schock. He's the author of that famous book, I'm Okay, I'm Not So Sure About You. It's now my pleasure to introduce the Executive Director of the Bay Area Radio Museum and the Hall of Fame, Mr. Len Shapiro, to get today's induction ceremony started.
All right, again, I'd like to welcome to the 11th annual induction ceremonies here. And today we add 10 more Hall of Famers to our esteemed collection of 166 members. And that covers since the 2006 first year that we held the Hall of Fame. And of course, remember, this covers 106 years of broadcasting in the Bay Area, from KQW to current. And the public cast 5,144 votes for all the categories. That's right on the top of the list in the past. So we've done very well on that. And before we get started, again, I'd like to remind you, if you have any archives or anything you want to donate to us, we'd love to have it. We're here to preserve the past and the future of broadcasting in the Bay Area. No one else cares, we care. So let's make sure we get it. That's it? So now let's get the program started here. And our MC for the day, the Coffee TV host, movie host, K-Fox and Coit radio personality, and of course a 2014 Barhof member, Celeste Perry.
Oh, that sounded good. Thank you so much. Really, it is. You forget how nice it is when people applaud for you. So we're here today. First of all, I just want to acknowledge all of the Hall of Famers who are here with us. So hello to Mike Amatori. You can save your applause for after. The list is really long. Okay, you can give it all to Mike. Steve Bitker, Stan Bunker, Bob Melrose, Dan Odom, Mike Heckner, Celeste, Peter Finch, Ben Fong Torres, Gil Haar, Rosalie Howard, Art Lieberman, Bill Ruck, Tom Saunders, Sam Van Zandt, Kim Wonderly. Did I miss anybody? I did. Oh, Susan Lee Taylor. That's the most applause. There you go. See, it's meant to be like that. People really care. Okay, so now we're going to officially start. Promise. Welcome to the 2016 Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame induction ceremony and job placement fair. I'm serious. Have you seen the line at the KDFC table? Okay, seriously. KDFC is a listener-supported radio station. The announcers work live shifts, get full benefits. I understand they get parking too. And they're not $85 gazillion in debt. So, if you're interested, drop off your resumes. Bill Luth, Rick Malone will take them. Okay, now I want to move on to this. Listen, I can tell you seriously from my own experience what an honor it is to receive this recognition from Barhof. And I think we need to stop saying Barhof, because frankly, I think it's something that sounds like you would do after eating bad clams. So we're going to work on the name, okay? I know how it feels to go home and to get out the hammer and find a place on the wall to put another hole in to hang up your beautiful framed paper certificate that you're going to get a little bit later this afternoon. So what I'm suggesting is, and I used to order all the trophies for my kids' soccer teams. So I'm suggesting a real trophy. I have a few examples. So all you do is you go to Google and you Google trophy microphone and look, okay? Oh, wow. And then there's this other one, just a little heavy, but you can actually use it. Oh, and shameless plug for my new radio station, K-Fox. But it's like tricep. Anyway, and you want to hold something when you give your speech. You've seen the Emmys. They're like, you know, Julia Louis-Dreyfus holding her thing, and also you could throw it at your boss when he fires you. You know it's going to happen eventually. And something for the heirs to fight over. That's what happens when you hire a woman to do this job. I start redecorating. Anyway. Hi, broads. Speaking of the my support group, for sure. Okay, listen, it's been a year of tumult in Bay Area radio, as we know. The venerable KISS 98.1 was hit by a drone, and out of the rumble crawled 98.1 Febreze, helping you get the stink out of your workday, or putting the stink into your workday, depending how you feel about relaxing favorites by Air Supply and Josh Groban. Hi, Jack. You are the best thing there, and I love you. I do, but I had to take a shot. But please listen to Jack Culp at 98.1 Febreze, in between the Josh Groban hits. And then there was Big 103.7, which up until a few months ago only played the hits of the 80s and more. And then they got rid of the more and the me. And, but it is a great place to go if you want to hear the flock of seagulls, when you need your flock of seagulls fix, right? Yeah, only 80s. Martha Quinn is at the helm, and I remember the first time Martha worked for Bob Pittman. Didn't they kick off MTV with the song "Video Killed the Radio Star"? Yeah, they waited 30 years to do it, and they finally did. So I'm happy for them. It's okay. And then the massacre at 750 Battery. And I was expecting that. I don't think that was the sound. KSFO and KFOG. The scene in the HR department that day could have been directed by Quentin Tarantino. It made Reservoir Dogs look like a Disney musical. Maybe it was more like Kill Bill, and then Rich and Scott and Jennifer, Mike, Sherry, Renee, Jennifer, Annalisa, and so on. Then again, what were you people people thinking, putting your careers in the hands of a company named after a dense, dark, looming storm cloud? How many of you have been to the ceremony before? Show of hands. Yeah. Radio people, such masochists. As you know, we sometimes go a little long on this event, and this year will be no different. In fact, we're fully prepared. We have got dinner. It'll be served at 6:30 tonight. So whatever you didn't order for lunch, you'll get for dinner, and then you'll have a couple hours to sober up. Cocktail starts at 4:45, so that's all good. This I promise you, we will get out of here before Coit starts playing Christmas music. Okay, so now I'm going to give you the rules of engagement today. Presenters have 3 minutes, right, before they hear the first, as we call it, the Barbieri chime. Can we hear the chime, Bob? So that's 2. And then at 3 minutes, they'll hear the wrap-up chime. Now, then the presenters will turn it over to the talented inductees. They'll be given 6 minutes for remarks. Bob, will you play the NBC chimes at the 5-minute mark? This will be 5 minutes. And then you'll have a minute left. And don't you dare pretend you don't know what a minute feels like. Come on, you know. And then at 6 minutes, you'll hear the full chimes. They could use you at Hofstra University on Monday night. Lester Holt, yeah, we'd love having you there. So, and if this doesn't work, I have planted professional hecklers in the audience. So we're at the Bass Cultural Center here in San Francisco, remember that. This is not Oslo, Norway. No one is winning the Nobel Prize for Economics, although that would be great because then maybe someone could save radio. This is going to be a wonderful afternoon. People love radio. Still, they do. You know they do. You know when you're at a cocktail party and someone says, what do you do for a living? And you say, I'm in radio. Everybody stops and listens. They want to hear how you got your job, where you worked, and then they want to tell you about how they had a job, midnight to 3 at the college radio station. They used to play, you know, Inagata DeVita and all that stuff. But then they realized that they weren't good enough to get a real radio job. They weren't. But you were. You have the talent, you have the guts, you have the grit to carve out a place for yourself in this impossible career. You're there on the dial, you've done it better than most, risen to the top of your class. Congratulations, Narcy, Kevin, Wes, Scoop, Hilly, Wilda, Dean, Dave, Bill, Ed, Hoyt, and Diane. And now we're going to get to it. Our first presenter today is Dr. Paul Chaudhry, who will be inducting Narcy Davis.
Narcy, you didn't tell me who I had to follow. There we were, sitting on the patio, basking in the warm autumn sun, enjoying a light lunch and a more robust sampling of the local wine. The tiny trattoria was located high up a winding mountain road in the heart of absolutely nowhere, Italy. Suddenly, the afternoon calm was shattered by an excited shout coming from around the corner. I know that voice, that's Narcy David. And I'm supposed to introduce him to a Bay Area radio audience. Talk about being totally superfluous. As the eldest of 3 brothers, Narcy became head of the household in Turlock when his father passed away. The boys helped their mother in the kitchen, as well as with raising the animals and in the garden. Much of their food was homegrown. This led to Narcy's dedication to always serving fresh ingredients. Years later, Gourmet Magazine was to attribute the advent of California cuisine to Narcy's, his eponymous restaurant, and Chez Panisse, which opened within a few months of each other, coincidentally in 1972. As a teenager, Narcy became a deacon in the Assyrian Church. This, coupled with his desire to help others, led to a lifelong affiliation with the Assyrian community. Narcy was president of the Assyrian Aid Society for more than 20 years. In December 2002, with the drums of war being beaten feverishly,
Narcy was scheduled to lead an aid mission into northeastern Iraq. Family and friends begged him not to go in view of the imminent onset of hostilities and the nature of the Iraqi president. But Narcy insisted on fulfilling his commitment. We all waited with bated breath until his return flight landed in the Bay Area. Community service has been a mainstay of Narcy's life. He was on the founding boards of the Berkeley Repertory Theater, the Berkeley Community Fund, and the Pacific Coast Farmers Association, serving as president of all three. He was one of the earliest presidents of the Arts and Craft Co-op of Berkeley. Narcy participates in annual fundraisers for multiple groups: the Uccle Teacher Trust in Contra Costa County, Suicide Prevention in San Francisco, the Mendocino Hospital Foundation, and the Central Coast Wine Classic. Exploring the world with Narcy is always an adventure. One day in Provence, with a light drizzle falling, we went for a stroll. As we entered a fig orchard, we suddenly stopped, looked at each other, and dropped to the ground, and began scooping up as many snails which were feeding on the ripe figs that had dropped. We filled the patch pockets of Narcy's raincoat. When we returned to our friends, some of the women recoiled in horror, because while we were exploring the world, the snails were exploring their new world, and Narcy was covered, his shoulders, chest, and abdomen, with crawling snails. No, they were silent. Nonetheless, the escargot that night was delicious, with a somewhat sweet, fruity flavor. Then there was the epic battle between Narcy and Dario, the singing butcher of Penzano. As the consumer, Narcy wanted our steaks cut a certain way. As a native Tuscan and a self-proclaimed world authority on Tuscan steak and all things Tuscan, Dario refused. The battle was engaged. It raged on for a while, but then Dario revealed that he no longer believed that the classic Chianina cattle of Tuscany were fit for Tuscan steak, and he was importing all his beef from Spain. Point, game, match to Narcy David. But we ate rabbit that night. The stories could go on forever, but the clock is running. So let me say, he's Narcy David, and he's here to say.
Wow, what an introduction. And 1972 is chosen as the date of this afternoon's program. That happens to be when I opened Narcy's restaurant. But first, I am honestly honored to have been elected to the Hall of Fame. Thanks to all of you who've made this possible. Every time I look at the members list, it just brings up a nice warm smile because of all of the wonderful memories that it brings along. I really need to recognize my wife, Vini, my toughest critic and my most amazing supporter. She knows when it's right and when it's not right, and believe me, I find out in a hurry. But soon after opening my restaurant, Narcy's in Berkeley in 1972, I appeared as a guest on Owen Spann's morning show on KGO. Jack Swanson was the director then. It wasn't long after that I got on the Catherine Crosby morning show on television on KPIX. After the third appearance, I had to join AFTRA, and they had to pay me $29 each time I made an appearance. Let me tell you, there were times that the phone at the office would be ringing before my cooking demonstration was finished with people wanting to make reservations. I would have paid them more than $29 for the reservations that we got. In 1977 to 1982, there was a PBS show called Over Easy, hosted by Hugh Downs and Mary Martin. Easy cooking for one or two people is what my segment was. It was a show that dealt with aging in America. And sure enough, as we get older, the number in the family gets smaller and smaller. The McGovern Report on Nutrition had just been issued, And we followed all of those guidelines in designing the menus and the recipes. Harvey Steinman and Al Hart were doing the KCBS kitchen at KCBS on Monday to Friday mornings. I started sitting in for Harvey to fill in when he couldn't make it. And you know, one thing leads to another. Joe Carcioni, the greengrocer, was on once a week. And in 1984, Charlie Seraphin, who was the director of news at KCBS, and I agreed on a Saturday version of the kitchen. We called it the KCBS Saturday Kitchen. It ran from 2 hours, for 2 hours, from 10 until noon. And the most wonderful part of it was that a week in advance, I would announce 2 wines that we'd be tasting the next Saturday. Usually a red and a white from the same winery, always a moderately priced wine. And some people would buy the wines and taste them at home as we were tasting them on the air. And then we'd talk about them. It wasn't long before we were just having a glorious time. George Rask was my host, and of course the all-time great recipe request was how to degas beans. George kept insisting that we should record it on a card, so the next time someone asked, we could just shove the card in. Well, let me tell you, this is a really neat technique. It was developed by the scientists over at the USDA lab in Albany across the bay. And they found that there are some certain complex carbohydrates that we do not have the enzyme in our body to break down. So they pass through the small intestine where they ferment, and hence the problem. No, dropping some baking soda in doesn't do it. The alkaline of the baking soda reacts with the natural acidity of the beans, and some CO2 comes to the surface. That doesn't do anything to solve the problem. The problem is so easy, I'm just going to have to tell you how it was done. In 1985, we started Narcy and Company Monday to Friday from 7 to 8 in the evening. It was hosted by Ron Lyons and Ron Reynolds occasionally as well. But we also continued the Saturday program. Ed Cavanero was the director of news and programming starting in '88. And I really have to make a comment on that newsroom. I've not seen every newsroom in the world, but it was fascinating to me that the space could be so open and so casual. People wandering from one desk to another, talking to each other. In the middle of the newsroom, there was a large counter that had food on it. People brought in foodstuffs. Al Hart's Snickerdoodle cookies were obviously, they hit every week when he brought those in. And yet, this amazing and incredible news was being produced day after day after day. Ed sat behind these glass walls, usually facing the other way, but there was nothing that man ever misses, I can tell you for sure. In 1990, suddenly KCBS became all news, no more talk. I became the food and wine editor, and I was asked to produce 13 90-second features a week. There'd be 2 a day, 1 on Sunday, and each would run 3 times. I've got to tell you, looking back on it, I sat there with my mouth open and said, how can you do a feature in 90 seconds? Well, of course, it didn't take that long to learn that 90 seconds is a lifespan if you plug in the information. But then, brand new, I got to work the board. Ouch. The board must be 7 feet wide with all of these buttons and devices and pushes. And it was Al Hart that straightened me out on that. He said, you know, it's not that different from a railroad station, a railroad terminal. You have all these lines coming in, but only one line can go out. Just keep in mind, you can bring in any one of these lines, but only one can go out onto the air. And it sounds a little simplistic, but it certainly set the tone for me, and I got to figure it out. Bong, bong. From 1990 to 2011, the KCBS Food News was on 365 days a year for those 21 years. In 2016, Ed Cavanero retired and Jack Swanson takes over. So my first and last news director has been Jack Swanson. And by the way, the degassing beans, I promised I'd give you the recipe. It's really simple. Drop the dry beans into boiling water. The more water, the better, but there has to be at least 3 times as much water as beans. Boil it for 2 minutes, shut off the heat, put a lid on it, and let it rest for an hour. Drain it and throw away that liquid. With it goes 85% of those carbohydrates that give us the problem, without losing any of the nutritional value of the beans. I can tell you, we eat a lot more beans at our house since we figured out. With KCBS Food News, Narcy David.
Thank you, Narcy. I can't wait to go home and degas my husband. I mean, my beans. Now in the sports category, we're going to hear about Kevin Ravitch, and John Rivers is the presenter. John?
Let's see what we can do. Amongst the amazing inductees today, we have one who is a head waiter. A little bit of explanation. You all remember getting your first radio gig. Most of us are also able to deliver a pretty good rundown of all those rejections that we had leading up to the first underpaid job. And then there were the non-radio jobs, which some of us are still probably doing. Jobs we struggled through while we waited for that, break. But few can match Kevin the Rat Radich's introduction to the wide, wide world of radio sports. It was back in '85. That was when the Niners won the Super Bowl. They beat Miami, had a 15-1 then record season for them. Giants also having a record season that year. They were losing, or in the midst of losing, 100 games. KFOG listeners, though, really didn't hear a whole lot about the sports. That's because our morning jock, M. Dunn, really didn't know a lot or really care a lot about sports. Rock and roll? Oh, yeah. Sports? Yeah, not so much. So KFOG's GM, Tony Salvador, you all remember Tony, wasn't happy with the on-air sports void, and he handed down an edict, as only Tony could do. We need a sports guy. And if you knew Tony, he wanted that sports guy yesterday. So we started some feelers with some local TV sports anchors, maybe get them under contract, they could do some call-ins, get that sports presence. In the meantime, we needed something right away. And so the plan was put together to put somebody in place, if only temporarily, and we let the fogheads know. We admit it, Dung is not sports knowledgeable. We need somebody who is. Send us a tape of how you would do sports for the fogheads, we said. And if you're one of the 5 best, we're going to give you a 1-day on-air audition with Dung. And if you're good enough, you might become the KFOG sports presence. Now, among the tapes that we got at KFOG, I love that tone, one from a head waiter at a historic San Francisco restaurant, the new Old Poodle Dog restaurant. Google it if you don't remember it. Yeah, of course, that was Kevin. Head waiter doing sports? Well, to be honest, Kev did have some broadcast training. He studied it at Cal State Hayward, and he had good sports creds. Basketball with the Shillelaghs. Of course, that would be the 4th grade CYO league Shillelaghs. Played baseball for a number of years, including 2 years running on the team that was the Northern California champs. That would have been 4th and 5th grade. And the frosting on the cake, just ask Kevin, his sports cachet topped. Went to the same school as Jason Kidd. He does have sports creds, though. He's a serious competitor. He was quarterback for his high school JV team, and they beat De La Salle. Back when you could still beat De La Salle. Had a tryout with the Milwaukee Brewers organization. Now, if you ask Kevin, he'll tell you it was only long enough for a cup of coffee, but hey, it was a tryout with pros. And he's an innovator. He holds a patent for a special batting tee designed to place the ball in a multitude of spots, just like a pitcher. In and tight, down and wide. Well, the bottom line, Kevin grew up playing and watching and loving sports. His audition tape to KFOG reflected that. It was a fan's love of sports competition. Not trying to emulate what others do on the radio. His delivery was a fan's honest take on what was happening on and off the field. My apologies, but there's a little bit more. It would be nice to say that Kev was a loyal foghead, heard about our search, and immediately sent a tape in. I would be lying. Credit goes to his sister Bevy. Thank you, Bevy. She was a foghead. She bugged him for days to do a tape. Rumor has it you locked him in a room and wouldn't let him out until he did it. Thank you. Good thing. Because his was one of 2 good entries. The other came from a fellow by the name of New York Vinny, who went on to his own sports career and radio. Remaining 3 contestants, well, we picked them basically because we promised we'd have 5. Now, being tossed live on the air when you have no experience is nerve-wracking. Matter of fact, one of the chosen 5 got off the elevator, paused, turned around, got on the elevator, and fled. Kevin had a case of nerves, but he still delivered a sportscast, which showed us our negotiations with those TV sports anchors. We could stop them. On that audition day, Kevin delivered, as he does to this day, an every-person view on take on sports. Kevin's your carpool companion. He's the one that kvetches about the Bay Area teams when they're having troubles or who glories in their wins, but he's not a homer. And along the way, he's humanized for us those bigger-than-life sports figures. 3 days after Joe Montana had potentially career-changing back surgery, Joe put rumors of his health to rest with an extended and exclusive interview with Kevin. And it was an interview recorded at Joe's condo. Kevin got the call from Joe. Joe said, "Come on down." Nobody else got that call, just Kevin. Kevin gets that type of inside scoop because players like Joe trust him. He brought their giants, Bob Brenly and Mike Krukow, into the studio. That was the year Kruk was getting 20 wins. A little bit of sports talk naturally, but mostly Kevin brought them in to spin some tunes, talk about music, and that day KFOG listeners heard the human side of the sports guys. As all of us have, Kevin has traveled up and down the radio dial. KRQR, he created the first FM sports talk show, Sunday Night in the Rocker Locker Room. It was on that show that Joe Montana called in after Super Bowl 24 and chatted about his 5 touchdowns. Nowhere else could Niners junkies get a fix like that. He did a stint at KNBR with Hall of Famers Frank and Mike. Portland treated to a dose of Kevin quality at KXL for a couple of years. Then back to California, Sacramento, KHTK. Bay Area quickly calling him home to KCBS, and then he settled in for an extended run at KGO, afternoon sports anchor. It was there Kevin picked up 2 Mark Twain Awards for the best sports report. And anyone who's ever heard his Sound Bites of the Day feature is going to be asking, how come only 2? It's because KGO quit paying the entry fee. Kevin may also hold some sort of record for the shortest period of unemployment. When KGO made the boneheaded move to let him go, KCBS wisely hired him 5 minutes later. And that means we can continue to listen and marvel at the excellence that is a Kevin the Rat take on sports. Ladies and gentlemen, former head waiter, Kevin the Rat.
Can I have the ticker tape? You have it? In 1972, I passed puberty. That was the year that my stupid friend Mike Herrick gave me this nickname, the Rat. And I've been stuck with this all my life, ever since. In fact, my mom leaned over. Mom's here. Mom, wave to everybody. Mom's 90, everybody. Come on. She's beautiful. There she is. Hi, Mom. Mom leaned over to me and said, "So they still call you the Rat?" I mean, just a few minutes ago, I said, "Thanks for listening, Mom." You didn't know that? It's embarrassing, though. I've had to introduce myself to legends like Willie Mays, you know. Mr. Mays, my name's Kevin the Rat, K5 Radio. And he said, "Kevin the what?" I mean, this sort of thing happened all the time. And I'm wondering, John Madden had this great bit where he thought, wouldn't it be great late at night at the Pro Football Hall of Fame if the statues talked to one another? What would they say? I hope that doesn't happen at the Barhof Hall of Fame. I could just see Frank talking to Mike, looking at my picture going, how the hell did he get it? I mean, it's winning a contest, are you kidding me? I mentioned Willie. Because of radio, though, I got to meet these people. I met him in spring training 1986. I was behind a batting cage in Scottsdale, and he took off his coat. Some schlub was hitting in the cage, and he said, give me a bat, give me that bat. And he took off his coat and proceeded to hit line shots all over the field. He was like 55 years old, and it was amazing. And he saw me, and he goes, okay, I'll go talk to you, let's go. So we walked to the outfield, and he talked for 10 minutes about his dad and how his dad taught him how to play. His dad's nickname was Kitty Cat. And he talked to me about outfield play, and I was an outfielder. I played center field. He was my hero. He was the greatest. And he acknowledged the fact that I knew something about the game. And his hero was Joe DiMaggio, so I'm getting choked up talking about this. Joe DiMaggio, one time, I was doing an afternoon sportscast for KRQR in the men's phone booth locker room at the Presidio Club. And I was playing golf, and then I'd come in and do the sportscast. You know, we had a tough gig. But Joe heard me giving scores. And he walked by, and he stuck his head in the phone booth, and I'm on the radio, and I'm going, hold on a minute. Joe DiMaggio's in my phone booth. And I looked at Joe, and Joe looked at me, and he was like shaking his head. What the hell is he doing? And he walked away, and he was naked. And I said, oh my God, Joe DiMaggio just walked away naked. That's how I met him. I also got to interview Mickey Mantle a few months before he died. He gave me 15 minutes of radio gold. He talked about his life, his regrets. He was amazing. I took the tape to the production room at KMBR. I had it on the editing reel, walked away. 5 minutes later, our great engineer, Hall of Famer Bill Rock, was running a tone over it. Oh.
Take back the one.
Thanks, Bill. How are you? All right, you remember that? Yeah. I have so many people to thank. Tony Salvador for giving me a shot, John Rivers for believing in me, Dave Logan taught me to say something, M. Dung and Scoop Nisker. Scoop mixed satire and humor and biting commentary with music. I'm honored to be in a class with Scoop Nisker, and I once walked in his newsroom. I love you, Scoop. I once walked in his newsroom, and he was hunched over his console, chanting. I walked over to John Rivers, said, John, what's up with Scoop? He goes, he's meditating. I said, meditating? Who's he talking to? His guru. I said, where's his guru? He said, India. So Tony Salvador, legend, gets the phone book, Bill, and looks down and says, who the fuck is calling India? At KRQR, the Lobster was great to me. We went to Super Bowl 25 in Tampa Bay. Whitney Houston sang the anthem. They had the Black Hawk helicopters over the stadium. Scott Norwood missed a field goal, and Joe Starkey stole my commemorative seat cushion. And we don't get good swag anymore. And Steve will tell you this. In fact, Steve will know this. When he goes to work, when he comes back from vacation, he'll find a box on the KCBS desk. We just got a gift, and I thought I'd bring it along just to show you. This is a beautiful gift sent from the Oakland Raiders. Oh, God. All of us,
A picture of Alvin.
KCBS, this beautiful gift. This is from the Oakland Raiders. Sweet! Is there anyone here that I can auction this off? I'll give you $5 to take it off my hands. $10. Anyone want it? Okay, it's yours. I want to mention some other people. I'm running out of time, but Rich Walkoff huge. When I was a kid, he took me aside and said, if you want to be good, listen to me. Paul Hosley helped me. Susan Lee Taylor and Stan Bunger have been brilliant. And Jeff and Patty and my best buddy, Steve Bicker, who I look up to more than anybody. So, my mom's here. My mom's here. She's 90. I'm glad she made it. I'm glad I made it. I would have hated to have her come back in 10 years and see me inducted posthumously. She raised 9 kids. She taught me to read. She insisted I get an education. Better, so, and boy, I really know how to stop a room. Anyway, I wanted to mention my mom and say something about my wife, Kim, who I love so much. Kim Wenderly, who's done so much for me in my life. I've struggled with demons, and she's helped me out of the darkness, and without her, I wouldn't be here. And my dad, too. My dad died in 2000, and I'm reminded of when I was 17 years old, sitting around a table, my dad and his best friend Danny, and a question came up, and the question was, what's Kev going to do with his life? And Danny said, I think he's going to be a teacher and a coach. And Dad said, no, I think he's going to be a sportscaster. He knew something I didn't know. But you're right, Dad. I'm a sportscaster, and now I'm in the...
Thank you, Kevin. You know, I always wondered why Kevin cleared our dinner table when we had him over for a meal recently, a dinner party. I never knew you were a head waiter. Best dinner guest ever. Okay, so now we're in the news category. Oh man, I used to listen to this guy all the time. Fantastic. I'm so excited to finally meet you in person and to say that Rosalie Howard, who I'm also a huge fan of, is going to come up and present to Wes Scoop Nisker.
Thank you, Celeste. Scoop likes to say that he ran away to San Francisco to be a beatnik, but he got here a little too late, so he had to be a hippie instead. And thank God for that. He actually came here from the Midwest to go to the Monterey Pop Festival, which I was at too, but we never met. But those were amazing days. The summer of '67, the Haight-Ashbury, the counterculture revolution in the air, the specter of the Vietnam War hanging over us, and a new form of radio, the weak sister on the dial, FM radio, morphed into underground progressive free-form radio in which every music set was a stream of consciousness commentary. And serving your community meant doing the daily dope report on KSAN, if everybody remembers that. It was a real thing. And Scoop, too, like Kevin, was hired basically right off the street when he came up to Hall of Famer Tom Donahue and said, you guys ought to have satirical news on the air. And Tom said, well, you can do it. And Scoop was no detached, impartial, just the facts, ma'am, news reporter. He was a guru. He was a wild man on the air. He took every news situation and event and took it from the micro back up to the macro, out into the cosmos, in the stars, wheeled you around, making it obvious how everything was connected and everything was clear. And we were looking down on the follies of the human race with its little foibles and squabbles down here on Earth. And all we had to do was take a deep breath and love one another, and it would all be okay. Listening to Scoop on the radio was like taking a psychedelic trip without dropping acid. But, like when you come down from acid, after the newscast was over, you could never quite remember the exact words. And you'd want to tell people, but it was like, I can't do it like he did it, but it was like, and this was before the days of the internet when we could just go pull up a YouTube video and show you. So Scoop began writing it all down in books. 5 books to date and counting, from Crazy Wisdom to You Are Not Your Fault, his latest. Absolutely required bedtime reading for us at our house. And then Scoop took his act on the road and started doing one-man monologues, improbably combining rap, music rap, with Zen Buddhism and irony and humor and political commentary all at the same time. And we would post some of these later on KFOG, some of his work when he came to us as a news commentator with Dave Morey. So this prompted my husband Barry to say that Scoop was the original stand-up cosmic. And Scoop also shares his insights and meditations with his Zen Buddhism community, who know him as Scoopji, at Esalen and at Spirit Rock in Marin. But it is Scoop on the Radio that we are here to celebrate today. I will never forget, before Kaboom, the fireworks, the pyrotechnics, Scoop would do the opening invocation with his then radio partner Dave Morey. And Scoop would whisk us all up into the sky before the fireworks. And that theme music of his, that unmistakable Miles Davis piece, when you crank it up, you knew you were in for a wild ride and that you were going to have brilliant epiphanies. And Bob, I think actually we have that theme music here today, don't we?
Thank you, Rosalie. Friends at home, friends in the studio, I have 60 seconds.
Dave
Okay,
Morey,
there's Scoop's
everyone.
music. That's what we ran under Scoop's commentaries. It's on a cart. It ran 4 minutes and 25 seconds. I dubbed it twice because Scoop rarely ran under 4 minutes and 25 seconds. So back sometime in the mid-'80s, I think it was, we were moving from the studios at Ghirardelli over to Green Street. I was coming to work one morning. This is right after we moved to the new Green Street studios. Looked down on the sidewalk, and right at the main entrance, overnight, someone had brought spray paint and a prepared stencil, and they had graffitiized the pavement right in front of the entrance at 55 Green. If you were coming in the building or even walking by, you couldn't help but notice, in big bold letters, "Thank God for people like Scoop Nisker." I ran upstairs, got my camera, came down, and took a picture. When I packed up and left, I took the picture with me. But now I think it's time to return it to the man it was about. And I know he'll probably toss it in the trash can, but Scoop, just take a look at it and know that the sentiment is pretty unanimous. Not only for his radio work with KSAN and KFOG, but also for the books he's written, the seminars he conducts, the properly centered consciousness he tries to bring to the rest of us. And I'm not sure I believe in God, but thank God for people like Scoop Nisker.
Dave Morey, everybody, from KFOG's Morning Show, longtime Morning Beck and Scoop's partner. Broadcasting colleagues, I give you Wes Scoop Nisker.
Thank you so much, Rosalie. What an elegant introduction. I can hardly live up to it except to say that we're all riding on this little rock together through space, spinning around our orbit in the sun spinning around it at 66,000 miles an hour, causing all the creatures who live on the surface of the planet to grow dizzy, bumping into each other, creating news. It's an honor to be here with all of you, and there's certain people in the world who love print and people who love television, but it's a special group of us who really love radio and have used it in many ways to inform and to enlighten and touch people's hearts, and it's really an honor to be thought of as one of that elite group. We used to say, FM broadcasters do it with frequency. Remember that? Radio is, you know, there's print and there's television. The radio is the happy medium. The happy medium. So I'm gonna follow up on what Rosalie was doing there with a little passage from my book, "You Are Not Your Fault," which is true, I think. This sort of touches onto a moment in our shared history. As Rosalie said, I wanted to be a beatnik when I came to San Francisco, but it was 1968 and too late to make the scene, man, you know. But it hardly mattered when you arrived. In the last half of the 20th century, San Francisco was an ever-evolving anarchist convention and coming out party. In the late 60s, youth rebellions were taking place all across America, as well as in Mexico City, London, and Paris. But San Francisco was the spawning ground of the alternative metaphysics, as well as the center of the celebration. It was Jerusalem and Babylon rolled into one. It was the place where disillusioned young people came together to create some illusions we could call our own. A few months after moving to the city, I got a job as a newscaster on a counterculture radio station, KSAN-FM. And for a few years before the profiteers took over, KSAN and stations like it across the nation were rightfully termed underground radio. We criticized the government, made fun of old-time religions, encouraged the use of marijuana and LSD, and of course, played the music to accompany all of these activities. We were tribal radio, filling the heads of American youth with a call to rebellion and celebration. The programming at KSAN reflected the growing counterculture interest in Asian spiritual traditions, as well as various esoteric myths and rituals. Every day, the morning disc jockey threw the I Ching and gave a full astrology report. As news and public affairs director, I would interview Buddhist, Hindu, and Sufi teachers who were beginning to come through town more frequently in the late 60s, offering the Western hippies even more new ways to pray and get high. Marshall McLuhan called radio the tribal drum, and it certainly was true for those who began to identify themselves as part of the hippie tribe. Although my newscasts became an essential element of KSAN's programming, the main message of the station was always the music. Hippies and radicals alike were caught up in the spell of the new rock and roll, the heartbeat of our common generational revolt. We told each other, they can't bust our music, meaning that no matter how much the authorities would squelch political protest, we would always be able to get messages of freedom, justice, and flower power out to the people through rock and roll songs. How wonderfully innocent we were to talking about my generation. In the early days of KSAN, I used rock and roll music to punctuate and add emotional intensity to my newscasts, maybe inserting Bob Dylan singing Masters of War into a story from Vietnam, or a line like the Jefferson Airplane's Got a Revolution, Got to Revolution, or the Youngblood singing Everybody Get Together, Try to Love One Another Right Now. The rock songs were our liturgy, our anthems, the internationals for the youth of the world. For a while, KSAN was supported mostly by advertisements from record companies and rock promoters, along with a few hip entrepreneurs trying to reach the growing counterculture population. Often to make money, the air staff would help produce the commercials for these sponsors. I produced a few ads for Undulator Waterbed Company, which, believe it or not, was one of 11 different waterbed companies advertising on KSAN during the first few months of 1971. The hippie tribes were obviously conducting their cultural experiments in comfort. To paraphrase Emma Goldman, If I can't sleep in a waterbed, I don't want to be in your revolution. As KSAN began making real money for Metro Media, a battle began for the soul of the station. The on-air staff tried valiantly to maintain its counterculture principles and the integrity of the station's underground sound. When told to play a public service announcement for the military, for example, we all refused. I remember one disc jockey trying to reason with the station manager saying, "Hey man, you've got to realize people are tripping out there in front of their radio. I don't want to be the one to bring them down with an Army recruitment ad." Well, another minute?
Yeah.
Questions? It was such a rare moment in radio, as Rosalie pointed out. You know, there wasn't a lot of money to be made or lost in FM radio. People didn't even have them and have FM on their dials, and it was a time for experimentation, and it happened simultaneously with this cultural explosion, this renaissance that was happening mostly in the Bay Area. You know, it was a beautiful, beautiful time to be working in radio, and I'll never forget it. And I really feel honored to be here and accepting this award. Thank you all for all the good work you do in the world. Keep the good sounds coming, good information.
He is the first. By the way, he is celebrating his 90th birthday in 2 weeks. So maybe you and Mrs. Rat? No, I'm kidding. I don't want a brother named Rat, another person. All right. Besides, he's married. Okay. Today on TV and radio, we are used to shows that lean left or right. You know, like MSNBC or Fox or NPR. That kind of dialogue was pioneered in the East, and then here first on the West Coast by people like my father, Hilly Rose. He is one of the most credible, honest, straightforward broadcasters you would ever want to hear or know. Before, hold on. Before, that must be the gassy guy. Before there was an internet, there was the Hilly. My dad was one of the first speed readers, and when he would have a guest on any of his talk shows, he would read their books. He would read every publication. He would read every newspaper. He knew more than any internet. And if you go on the internet today, you really don't know if you're getting the real story. My dad had the real story. So when the guests were on the show, they'd say, "Oh, that was in 1942. He'd say, "No, that was 1944, and let me tell you about it." By holding his own light to his show, the high standard, he piqued all our interest at the audience, that we were listeners to rise to his occasion. It taught all of us to be better and more intelligent people, and I can't think of many shows present this day that provide such a service to listeners. I'm in awe of my father because he fought for the tax bill Proposition 13, which he then forced the gentlemen who were going to pass that bill in a room until they made a decision, and then Prop 13 was passed. And that was because of my dad. He made history. He also continued to make history through his career. He had Eldridge Cleaver on his show. One of the first interviews, Eldridge Cleaver. If you think about racial tensions that are going on right this minute, at that time it was one of the first interviews that Eldridge Cleaver ever gave. And he thanked my father and wrote him a letter saying what an amazing interview it was for him. He's one of the first members of AFRA, which is now AFTRA. And we'll be right back. All right, I'll be real quick. He also is one of the first Ghostbusters. He is the first person to do paranormal radio across the country. He was one of the hosts of Coast to Coast, and he did seances, he had alien exposures, he did all sorts of crazy stuff, and he was one of the first restaurant TV critics. He also had a TV show here. Look, I'm running short of time, there's just too many credits. I do want to remind all of you that he had the Beatles on his show in 1964. And my brother stole those, my dad got an autograph for my sister. My brother stole them, tried to sell them in junior high, and put me in junior high the next day. No one would believe him. So I'm just going to end with this. There are very few firsts in the business, and only one Hilly Rose. On behalf of all our family and all the broadcasters in our family, you have chosen the right broadcaster to honor. All of us in this business are better for him and for all his work, and for every day to live up to his example. I'm honored to be his son, and I love you, Dad. And I'm honored to introduce the newest member of the Bay Area Hall of Fame, Mr. Hilly Rose.
Mike?
Can you hear me now? Okay, we'll get my speech out here. By the way, what was it, the Rat's mother? It's 90? What are you doing tonight, baby? I want to thank the members of the Academy. Speech, I'm sorry. When radio was fun, is that a slogan? Yes. I could fill all I and will in just a second. I want to a couple of quick stories. My very first show in San Francisco, I was listening to somebody at night on cable, and it sounded fairly easy. You played a few records. You said K-bong, A-bong. Anybody remember that? B-bong, L-bong. It was, anyway, so I thought, well, I'll just go up to that radio station and see whether they want anybody. So I went there, and it was one room over in Oakland. And I said to the program director, you need some help. He said, here, take over, do the show. What I didn't realize is that radio is not exactly fun. It's a lot of work that is fun. Anyway, so what this program was, it was 8 to 12, and 8 to 10 was music. I don't even remember what kind of music. And you would introduce it, and there were, remember it was 12 inches on the lip or 30 seconds on the lip that you were supposed to talk over. So what you had to do basically was preview it, decide what you're going to say, then come back and say, and I had this, what was it, Laura? You called it?
Chimes.
The chimes, yeah. And so I didn't realize, I thought it was in a cart or something. And so what you did for 2 hours was, and now here's Sinatra singing whatever, and then immediately, on cable, K-bong, A-bong, because you did this by hand, not by any mechanical means. Anyway, make a long story short, of interest to this group is 2 hours later, the program director walks in. He said, well, I had 2 hours of relaxation. I hope you enjoyed yourself. Goodbye, I don't want to see you again. Yeah, but who was this guy? In 1960, Al Hart. Believe it or not, Al did everything, didn't he, in radio? I want to thank Jack Swanson, always a good friend. And when I contacted him recently, I said, Jack, I'm 90 years old and I don't think I'm going to apply for a job. It's a little bit much. But Jack, over 30 years, whenever I call him and say, Jack, I'd like to come on, he could find a way to put me on. Even when I was on KABC in Los Angeles, I'd take a 2-week vacation, come up here and do KGO for 2 weeks. I mean, I'm that kind of a radio nut. And, believe me. So the first time I ever did KGO was way back, beyond most of your recollection. They had a slogan then, and I can't quite remember it. It was something like, KGO, 81 stories in the air of music. Anybody remember that? That's how far back that goes. So that was even before Jim Dunbar. And anyway, they hired me finally after knocking on their door, and they said, okay, come in and do Jim Dunbar's program in the morning. And I said, oh, okay. So I came in and I was doing the show, and there was some workmen out there, and they were putting in some bulletproof glass because somebody had taken a pot shot at Jim Dunbar. And so I mentioned this glass was coming in, and the executives
came running down and said, "Don't say a word about it because we don't know if this works or not." That's peculiar. Anyway, it was a lot of fun. Somebody mentioned Eldridge Cleaver, my son did. He did mention that he's the voice of KGO TV currently. And that will give you credit again. Gil Haar, he came over to me a few minutes ago and he introduced himself. I wouldn't have known who he was, and he probably wouldn't have known who I was. But I always vowed that the next time I saw Gil Haar, I was going to punch him in the face. Now, the reason for it is at the time I was working on KNEW, and I was working 10 to 2. And there was nobody in the newsroom and late overnight. And so I didn't know anything was going on. And I went home, went to sleep. 6 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call from the operator. "Billy Rose?" "Yes. I have a conference call for you." "Oh, how exciting. Who's it from?" "I don't know, just know it's a conference call." And then she patches me in to what's going on. I don't remember who it was that was on the air before me, but he was saying, "What a wonderful person, and what a great tragedy, and what a life." I'm saying, "Who the hell is he talking about?" Because I don't know, and I'm next on the air. And it was Gil Haar, and I wasn't sure it was, but he told me, yes, it was, that put him on the air. And I, at the last moment, whoever the guy was before me said, "And we hope that Bobby Kennedy will pull through." And I didn't know that, and it was a lot of fun. Okay, you mentioned, Eldridge Cleaver. Huey Newton, as some of you may remember, if you're old enough, decided to go to Sacramento and go to the legislature. He and 2 or 3 other guys, and they had long rifles. Anybody remember that? It's a long time ago. Anyway, so that, nobody knew who they were. Nobody ever heard of them. Nobody ever heard of the Black Panthers. And so I was in Oakland at KNW, and I put my feelers out and asked to get Huey Newton on the air that same night. Huey decided he didn't want to do it, but Eldridge Cleaver did. And his wife and a few other people came in, and for the first time, we understood who the Black Panthers were and what they were about and so forth. In the meantime, I always make friends with the police chief because you get a lot of tips that way. And I hadn't talked to him, but I went on the air and I got out in Jack London Square. Absolutely silence, nothing. And I thought, gee, they would have a couple of cops around or something. So I called the police chief the next morning and I said, "You rotten son of a bitch. You know, I get out of there and there's nobody protecting me, nobody taking care of, nobody worried about me, with these guys who are obviously armed and violent." And he said, "Who told you there was nothing there? We were all hiding in our corners." Thanks a lot. That's part of the fun of radio, folks. I want to thank Hank Bassane for probably the best years of my life in radio. He hired me for Spectrum 74, and I just know everybody who was anybody in show business or politics who came on Spectrum 74. And I want to right now make a donation to this group because my wife and I weren't too sure what to do with the tapes. We have my interviews with Bing Crosby, Nat King Cole, Lucille Ball, well, the Beatles, yes, of course. And so we are going to donate all of these tapes and the woman sack to play them on, all of them to this organization, and hope that you will find a purpose for it. So Hank became a lifelong friend of mine, and that was the most fun I've ever had in broadcasting. Jack Swanson, I told you, for 30 years I worked on and off at KGO. And Paul Carroll, was the program director at KDW. So all of those folks contributed to the fun that I had. And I hope that the future radio is going to get better than it is now. I doubt it. And I'm sorry about that, folks, but you know, things come and pass. I was also on TV here, KTVU, KTVU, had my own show there, KPIX, KGO-TV. And my first show on KGO-TV, I went out to when theater openings, and I'd stand out in front and do a remote. So there we go. And now to make things joyous at the end, you know, in radio, especially in talk radio, if you don't have a good producer, you ain't got nothing. And I got to tell you that my wife, Mary Rose, would you please stand for just a moment? In radio, if you don't have a good producer, they said you need nothing. So I knew I had a good producer. She produced my show for years. So what do you do, smart ass? What you do is you marry her. And we've been married for 44 years, and today is her birthday. So please, everybody, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you, Mary. Happy birthday to you. Bless you all. The best days of radio are ahead. We hope.
Another round of applause for Hilly. Thank you, Hilly. Hilly has a podcast in. What do you think? Right? Absolutely. Now we're going to move on. I know that it's getting a little bit late, and so we have to move it a little bit. We are at the Bass Cultural Center. You've heard of the Bass Separatists, right? These people are very serious. I mean, at any moment they'll just come and take over. It'll be over for us. So, Pioneers. Ben Fontoras, it's your turn. Ben Fontoras, Radio Waves, also a Hall of Famer, 2008. You're going to talk to us about Wilbur Wilson Church, Ben.
I'll have a blue Chris. Oh, I'm sorry, wrong luncheon. Just to let you know, so you can relax, I have just been degassed, so, okay. Now, I know what you're asking. You're thinking, why is Fontoras doing the presentation for Wilda Wilson Church? I have an idea. It's my punishment for calling her Wilma in my column, Radio Waves. Yeah, I'll give him one of the deceased inductees. I'll show Mr. Fontyco. But guess what? It is no punishment. Wilda Wilson Church was a true pioneer in radio and falls into that category of finally, after many years of being qualified, she is being enshrined. I'm happy to do the honors. Thanks to Irene Heinstein, a friend and member of CHRS, I'm able to draw on research on this church. In the San Diego Union of June 1929, she is described as a dramatic director and the first woman ever to present a complete drama through the air. Said the newspaper, she probably has encouraged and discovered more microphone talent along dramatic avenues than any one individual. Mrs. Church has been identified with NBC since its organization and is director of drama at KGO Oakland. KGO Oakland. That's how far back she went. Dr. Hilly and Mrs. Ratstein. The era of the big broadcasts of comedies, dramas, and family stories dates back to 1920. And that's about when Ms. Church began. She was born in Sydney, Ohio in 1871. She passed away in May of 1958 at age 86. She studied drama at Emerson College of Oratory in Boston and then taught there. After marrying in 1901 and having a son and daughter, she divorced her husband, an inventor who apparently came up with nothing. Who needs you? And moved to Berkeley to place her kids into a good small high school. In Berkeley, she taught at a private all-girls school where she headed up the drama department. A daughter-in-law said that Wilda always wanted to go on stage. Ms. Church herself said that she had offers for stage work but declined them because of her children. But when radio came calling, she was ready. In 1922, KRE began broadcasting out of the Hotel Claremont in Berkeley, and when the station decided it needed to expand its programming, Ms. Church was enlisted, initially to produce a weekly variety show, and a year or so later, the station's first drama productions. I said she was enlisted rather than hired, as she noted for our 1932 biography. From NBC, I joined them and worked for a year with no compensation other than the zest I had in the work. I inveigled the artists to appear for nothing, arranged the programs, and then wrote it up for the Berkeley Gazette. I didn't know Cumulus was around in the 20s. Early in 1924, she left KRE and her teaching gig and moved to a brand new station, KGO, at 9:60 a.m., where she became full-time dramatic director for the KGO Players at the GE radio station in Oakland. She would produce, by her own count, some 250 programs for the station through 1930. She worked 4 nights a week with cast and crew and performed on the 5th. She noted the pay in those days was $5 a week, but none of us would give up the memory of those old days or what we learned for large sums of money. She did rub elbows with stars on occasion. A 1928 clipping from the Oakland Tribune reported that Mary Pickford, America's sweetheart, had her first voice test at KGO and was cast for the talkies by Wilda Wilson Church, authority on the radio drama and head of the NBC Players on the Pacific Slope. Well, NBC had taken over KGO, and just like that, Ms. Church expanded her work beyond the Bay Area. In the Tribune in 1931, she was called the first woman to produce radio dramas in the West, and was one of the trailbreakers in the path which led to present-day microphone production. Ms. Church was not confined to behind the scenes. She had occasional roles in programs like One Man's Family and Memory Lane. But she was proud to be a programmer and a producer. As he noted in 1932, while radio drama is too young to have built up such great traditions as stage drama, it has come from behind the curtain of the theater, the club, and the school, and has reached every home in every city, village, or lonely mountain shack in the country. Through the radio is offered an opportunity for a renaissance in drama, getting away from the morbidity and triviality into which the art has fallen, and introducing a greater freedom, new powers, larger contact with life as a whole. By means of the radio, drama may break through the chrysalis of the stage form, which has held it so long, and flower into something vastly more beautiful. So spoke a pioneer, an original broad in broadcasting, and a dedicated, passionate, creative force in radio. It is my pleasure, my honor, to induct Ms. Wilda Wilson Church into, not Wilda, Wilda! To the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame, Wilda. We here at Barhof will accept the honor for this church. Thank you very much.
Well, I get to induct one of the other pioneers, and probably most of you don't know much about Dean Buddha Maddox. He passed away 51 years ago. He came to the Bay Area in 1933 to work at KYA, and he was brought on by the behest of William Randolph Hearst, the chief. And the chief asked him his first job to create an amateur radio hour show that would be broadcast on the station, KYA. Before this, he was a vaudevillian. He worked at on Broadway stage. He was the English announcer for the Chinese National Radio in Peking and Shanghai, and he also did the PA announcements at Madison Square Garden. the old Madison Square Garden. During his first year at KYA, though, he started this project. He went over to the station manager and said he needed some ideas. Give me some ideas. I need an idea here. The station manager told him, don't bother me with the details, just get it done. So he made his first call on the air for talent. Hundreds came down to the KYA studios, and of course about 100 police officers to keep the party moving. He brought the microphone out to the street, and the first show was on the air. And that would begin a 2-year run on KYA. Then the sponsors had a little problem with KYA, and they moved it over to KFRC, and then it ran there for 19 years on the Donnelly West Coast Network, the Donnelly Mutual West Coast Network. The Marin Del Dairy Hour was heard on Saturday nights from 8 to 9 p.m. Dean also got his nickname, the Buddha, from that show because he got up there and one of the talents said, "You're sitting in front of that microphone like a Buddha," and it stuck. That was his nickname the rest of his life. He also became such a big pitch man that Owl Drugs hired him to do the Man on the Street interviews on KFRC and on KROW in Oakland. He did the original ones on KFRC at the cable car roundabout on Powell, and then he did the other ones on 13th and Broadway in Oakland. But finally, Maddox still had a love for sports, so Ernie Smith was holding down the Seals, so he went after the Oakland Oaks. And he did the Oaks from 1939 to 1942. According to Brick's Law, the owner of the Oaks, attendance went up because of Dean Maddox during the war. He really did a great job. But then there's always the famous recreation stories. You heard some from Roy's story, you heard some from Don Klein. They would drop off communications and all of a sudden there'd be a rain delay, or all of a sudden the lights went out in the stadium until they got copy enough to continue doing the broadcast. So Dean, unfortunately, misplaced a lot of his wire copy, and he went from one inning of the Seattle Rainiers to the second inning of the Seattle Rainiers. The station started getting some calls. Why did you jump from one? What happened at the bottom of the inning? What did you do to them? And he said that the Rainiers the Oaks waved the bottom half of the inning because the Rainiers were so far ahead that it didn't make any difference if they played the bottom half of the inning. Yes. And the famous thing is, he wasn't fired. He continued doing his job. So now we'd like to welcome Dean Buddha Maddox to the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame.
And of course, that was Len Shapiro, Executive Director of the Bay Area Radio Museum and the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame. Thank you so much, Len and Ben, for filling us in on these important stories about our radio history. We're now going to move to the executive category, and we have Trish Bell, terrific voiceover artist. In fact, Love to Voice is the name of her voiceover company, a broadcast legend, a Bay Area radio personality, and she'll be presenting to Dave McKenzie.
Well, like some of us, I started radio at college. I had the college radio station where I could play any song I wanted to at the last minute, wherever my heart was taking me. From the first time I got behind a microphone, I said, I am not giving up until I make it to San Francisco. Started out in Monterey, ended up in Salinas, over the hill to San Jose, from adult contemporary to shock rock to rock, and then to KBLX in Berkeley. It was at KBLX that I picked up a weekend gig after being fired at KSJO. And at a staff meeting, Harvey Stone said, KABL has changed their format, and they may be our competition. KABL was a standards radio station. I thought to myself, well, this could be it. I don't want to go south, I want to go north. I want to go to San Francisco. So I went home, picked up the telephone, and called KABL, and the program director answered the phone. It was Dave McKenzie. I never thought in my wildest dreams I would end up talking to the program director on the phone, because I had already had a few stints to know what it was like to be in radio, and I knew it was tough. I proceeded to tell Dave, I'm on air on the weekends at KBLX. Could you listen to me? And Monday I'll call you. So sure enough, I called him back on Monday, and not only did Dave listen to me, but the GM listened to me, the morning man listened to me, and several other jocks. And he said, when can you come over? So I drove over to Battery Street, sat down, and met this gentleman. He was an unbelievable gentleman. I had no idea that somebody could be at a radio station for 30 years, one radio station. He started out as a copywriter and ended up being their program director. I couldn't figure Dave out because he was such a character. And he said, you're the first female. You're going to join a gentleman that has already been on the air for almost 30 years. He's never had a partner. Can you do this? Oh, I'm sure I can. I know I can do this. He said, I want to tell you something. We have a slogan, and when you get on the airwaves, you make sure you articulate that slogan very well. Okay, what is it? Soft hits and easy favorites. Don't slur that together. Do not slur that together. Okay, okay. So I went on my first day on the air, and sure enough, who did I get a phone call from? Dave. Come over to the city. I need to talk to you. I need you to say it a couple of more times. Soft hits and easy favorites. One of my most favorite PDs, very saddened when he passed, but my favorite host that I sat with was Bill Moen. And both Dave and Bill gave me the opportunity to fulfill my goal of being in San Francisco radio. So we have a clip from Bill who describes Dave perfectly.
I wish that you were here, Dave. No one deserves the label Hall of Famer more than you do. You put a radio station at or near the top for almost 35 years with your talented pen, your offbeat, zany, let's face it, nutty sense of humor. You rode herd on a passel of egos as any program director should, with tact and good humor. In fact, I used to walk out of your office thinking that I'd been complimented, when all you'd done was tell me to shut up, you're talking too much. Listeners were charmed and confused when told that a freight car filled with railroad ties was available if they'd hurry. Oh, and don't miss the harp concert at 2:45 a.m. Sunday morning. And who else but a Hall of Famer would come up with a St. Patrick's Day snake race at Crown Zellerbach Plaza? In fact, it made the papers in Dublin, Ireland, much to the confusion of the Irish. And it was Dave who came up with the KABL cable car bell ringing contest in Union Square. Well, Dave is gone now. KABL, harps and all, silent as the fog. But the bells still clang in the square thanks to an old Hall of Famer. Thank you, Dave, for all those years.
And thank you, and congratulations to one of my favorite program directors, Dave McKenzie.
Thank you, Trish. It's a great story, and I'm always going to think of you now as the first female. It's so cute. We're going to move on to executives. Oh, no, that is executives, excuse me. I'm sorry. Engineers. They keep it all going. Robert Hammett, Edward Edison, and to present, Art Lieberman, broadcast engineer, Cumulus Media, Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame 2010, and a broadcast legend. Art.
Thank you very much. As chairman of the Society of Broadcast Engineers, the San Francisco chapter, our chapter has been given the privilege of selecting the Hall of Fame inductee in the engineer category for the class of 2016. For this year, we've decided to make a posthumous award to Bob Hammett and Ed Edison, co-founders of the nationally known consulting firm of Hammett and Edison. accepting for the families and associates of Bob and Ed is Stan Salick. He's a senior engineer with H&E. And so we'll make it short and sweet. Stan?
Thanks, Art, for the kind introduction. I'm proud to accept this award for Bob Hammett and Ed Edison on behalf of Bill Hammett and the firm of Hammett and Edison Consulting Engineers. Bob Hammett founded the firm in 1952 as under the name Robert L. Hammett, P.E. Consulting Engineer. Ed Edison, formerly of RCA, became a partner in 1957, and the firm under its present name was created. The firm began in San Francisco, moved to Burlingame in the 1960s, and then to Sonoma in 1994. Under Bob and Ed's leadership, the firm has provided engineering services to many, if not most, of the radio stations in the Bay Area, along with other radio and TV clients across the nation. When I began at the firm in 1991, Bob Hammett and Ed Edison were already retired. However, to my luck, they were also remained as consultants to the firm, and in that capacity, I had the opportunity to work with them for several projects, including some for AM and FM stations in the Bay Area. Bob passed away in 2002 and Ed in 2009, but their firm continues in its 64th year. So thanks again to the Bay Area Hall of Fame and SPE Chapter 40 for this great honor, to the original Hammett and Edison Consulting Engineers.
Just a quick reminder to all the inductees, we'd like to take a photo at the end, and we were trying to do the beginning, but we'll move it to the end in front of the poster over there on the far side.
Alrighty then. Time now for the program host category. Are you ready? Okay, all ready? Let's go. Come on. Hoyt Smith. I always thought with that name you could have had a great career as a bluegrass artist, but I don't know if you played the fiddle. Anyway, program host Bill Luth, president of KDFC, is here to do the presenting.
So, the last two awards come after the posthumous awards, and it's for a classical station. I don't know what the message is. And on top of that, after 3 hours, we're going to relax with the classical format. I love this. So we're going to be perky, because that's the way we roll at KDFC. And Hoyt, don't call me Hoyty Smith, is who I'm going to proud to introduce here at the station that many of us refer to as the KKSF reunion. So many KKSF folks have come through that station, have done wonderfully well, except the lovely and charming Diane Nicolini, who you're going to meet in just a second. And let me just take 30 seconds to say Diane was my first radio friend in the Bay Area in 1989. We were on a station together. So we'll hear from her, and I heard that voice and I went, oh my gosh, this is like the greatest voice in radio of all time. I'm proud to still work with Diane. And when I came back to classical in 1997, the very first person I called to hire was Diane Nicolini. So that out of the way. And then I hear this voice in the hallway. So in those days, that was during the time when there was a lot of churn in the ownership in the market. And KKSF and KDFC were co-owned very briefly. And so we were moving in to those studios, and KKSF was still in the building. And I hear this voice in the hallway monitors, and I'm going, I got to get that guy. Who is that guy? And I had no idea. We never know what they look like until this towering man walks by me and goes, that's Hoyt Smith. I said, Hoyt Smith needs to be on this classical radio station. So I start courting Hoyt with beers back then, because that's how you get radio people. And so Hoyt and I would go out. He's like, why would I ever go to a classical station? Why? And I'm like, because you would sound great there. You would do wonderfully well there. And he's like, yeah, but I'm the afternoon guy at KKSF. I've been here forever. We're like a top 5 station. Why would I? go with you guys. Well, then he got fired. Right? And he goes, well, maybe this looks a little more interesting. Let me try this. But first I got to get married. So he marries the lovely Jacqueline, who he's with here on his right. And then it was time to start with KDFC. That was 1999. I'm already out of time. 1999, I think we played that. In 1999, Hoyt was afternoons, I was mornings, Diane was middays, and Rick Malone over here was evenings. In the fall of '99, KDFC was the #1 rated music station in the market, and did it again in 2000. And most people think that's not possible. The 12 plus, I know that's a number that nobody cared about then, but 12 plus, we were the #1 radio station because of these kinds of personalities that connected. And with Hoyt, the thing about Hoyt was the sense of humor that he brought to a radio station that played classical music. One of the first and only people who really could make the magic of making that kind of connection on a classical radio station. And he was people's friend. He was normal to a point. He was lovable. He was just one of those rarest types of classical announcers. And when we went public 5 years ago to be a listener-supported station, that was powerful because people don't give to music, they give to people. And the love fest that came about when we went classical, or went listener-supported classical because of Hoyt and Diane and the rest of the gang, became just a wonderful story for all of us who switched over to that. Listeners say it best. Robin in Sebastopol wrote to us and said, I relate so well to Hoyt Smith and his honest and fun efforts to help us enjoy all facets of classical music. And Tracy in Los Altos says, you and the music, Hoyt, you wake me up every day. You bring smiles and delight. Deborah in Healdsburg says, I just love, love, love Hoyt. And Gerald in San Carlos says, who doesn't love Hoyt? That's how we feel about Hoyt Smith as well. So let me just introduce you. If you haven't met him before, he's been around for a while, but he's a legend through KDFC and KKSF and the other stations he's worked for. The irreplaceable, the irreverent, the irresistible Hoyt Smith.
My broads are here. I love it. All right. Is the bar open yet? Yeah. The long national nightmare. We call another Barhof. I was just sitting here thinking and listening to all this cool stuff and all these great radio people, and I realized that I can get this on my iPhone. I may be the only classical announcer with my singing jingle. I'll just change out the call letters and everything. It has been really, really interesting, and I was away for a couple weeks on vacation and had a chance to think deep thoughts in between beers about all the different formats, all the different places, all the friends and all the relationships that I've made over the years. And the luck that happens to so many of us that we're kind of at the right place at the right time, and we know the right people somehow, and we didn't piss them off, which in my case happened a little bit too often. Full of choices, roads taken, friendships made that have brought us all to this place in time. My first choice was college, and I thought about going to Humboldt State. Believe it or not, they had a radio and TV department, a very tiny one. It was a little remote, a little too cold, a little too foggy, not a lot of opportunity. I thought about San Francisco State. My folks would have loved that because I would have been close to home, but I would have had to compete with a lot of you for the few radio jobs in town. That wasn't going to work. So I ended up in San Diego, and that turned out to be a real interesting choice for a radio guy. Is that my phone or? Oh, good. It's still playing. How do we stop this thing? San Diego won out. There was a lot of people there who were going on to big things in radio and film. A guy named Gary David Goldberg, who started Family Ties and a few other sitcoms. He was one of my classmates. Kathy Kennedy, who now rules the universe from the Presidios, Lucasfilm. She was one of my classmates. And my best friend in college was a guy named T.W. Scooter Landis, and he ended up saying, oh no, I must do documentary film. He got into fighter jets and followed cruise missiles on tests, filming them. So that's what a lot of my classmates were doing. So I didn't have a lot of competition, frankly, when I went out looking for radio jobs. We had one of the early NPR stations on campus, and I started out there. And actually, the first year, I met somebody at the steps of the TCF building, a friend for a long time, Lynn Durley, who had a great career in news and in traffic here in the Bay Area. And Lynn taught me about everything that he knew up to that point about radio. The radio labs were empty because nobody was interested in radio at San Diego State. So I played radio for about a year, learning how to cue up records and splice tape and all the rest of that stuff. And I'm thinking about the roads taken, the roads that took me to some interesting places. For instance, a posting on a bulletin board at the TCF building was for a little station off the coast called Carl FM. And to this day, the program director at the time, who went on to a big career in LA, a guy named Billy Jugs, interesting name. Anyway, he said, I have no idea how that got posted there at San Diego State, but nevertheless got a chance to work at that station. And then I don't remember who turned me on to an opportunity at KFMB, where my singing jingle appeared. And I had the great Charlie Van Dyke introduce me. That was pretty cool. Also, Peter Finch, you son of a, he comes up today, he goes, I used to listen to you on the radio in San Diego.
Grew up listening.
Yeah, grew up listening. Yeah. This is the new blonde. So anyway, some great people to learn from at KFMB. Names, I don't know if you know that well, Hudson and Bauer, Perry Allen, Clark Anthony. There's some great people there. And I ignored the PD there, who basically told me to shut up and play the hits, and I ignored him to my benefit. I'm getting way off my notes. So Bill Luth already told the story about how we got together at KDFC. I remember it a little bit differently, but I do remember the beer part. And I remember how proud I was that I had my own parking space on 450 Townsend. I thought, man, I've made it. But anyway, Paul Goldstein had other ideas. I was asked to play the home version of the game, and so I ended up at KDFC. I guess I just want to thank a lot of people right off the bat, and I see so many people here today that I've had the chance to work with. I realize Gil Haar is here, who is our stellar newsman at KYUU, distinctive voice at KYUU and KMBR. Miranda Wilson, Maria Lopez are here today. Janet Lawson, Sherry Brown. Although Sherry and I, we were just in the building. A lot of these folks, you know, Jack Culp, we were all in the Entercom family and the rest. Who else is on my list here? Well, let's see. Lynn Sloan is here today. Trish Bell, Sam Van Zandt, Blake Lawrence, Rick Malone. And if I missed you, we'll fix it all in post. So just come up here later. We'll talk about it. Thanks to Ron Reynolds, Bill Dodd, Sandy Beach, Scott Burton, Billy Jugs, Bill Weaver, Jack Friday, Steve Feinstein, who was one of the first people, I get verklempt over Feinstein and all that, but he was the one who gave us the first, really, my first coaching. Bill was the second. Now we have someone named Lorna Osmond, who USC Radio has hired to make us all sparkle a little bit more. Great support from USC Radio. That is unnerving, isn't it? So thanks to Bill Luth and Brenda Barnes of USC Radio for the support that they give to all of us, and yes, Lorna. And it's interesting, I started out in public radio at KPBS in San Diego, and I thought, well, this is okay, but you know, you're not going to get anywhere and you're not going to make any money unless you're in Washington working for them. And it's just weird how my whole career has come back to public radio. And listeners supported public radio, and we have some wonderful support all around the Bay Area for what we do. So I think I've covered everything, and I can't believe that I won this award, but I'm thrilled beyond measure. Thank you so much.
Congratulations, Hoyt. Very nice. I've been filling in on the morning show a few times at K-Fox, and Hoyt sneaks down the hall and comes and says hi to me sometimes during the long records. He's just, you're so sweet. I'm really thrilled for you. And one of your co-hosts, program host Diane Nicolini now, who's going to be presented by her daughter Monica Hansen. And I ran into Diane at the elevator a few days ago and said, can you tell me something about your daughter? So she very proudly talked about her career in teaching, and then as she was walking away said, and she doesn't like classical music. But I know you're your mom's biggest fan, so.
Great introduction. Thank you so much. So good afternoon. My name is Monica Hansen, and although I spend my day talking in front of a bunch of kids, I'm extremely intimidated to be talking in front of you, so I'll do my best. I am an extremely proud daughter of Diane Nicolini. My mother is a true Bay Area native who grew up in Oakland, and fortunately for me, went to Cal where she met my dad, Jim. When he started medical school at KU, they moved to Kansas City, where Mom got her first radio gig at classical KXTR. Who would have guessed that a job that started out as a necessity to pay the bills would be the beginning of a 30-plus year connection with all things classical. They returned home in 1983, and Mom started work at classical KKHI, located high atop the elegant St. Francis Hotel. Even though I was 3 or 4, I still remember going and visiting her and wanting to touch all the buttons. There she worked with such radio legends as Scott Beach, Ken Ackerman, Lou Sinclair, and Keith Lockhart. And yes, there was a serious lack of women. KKHI was sold to Westinghouse in the early 90s. Everyone was let go, but soon thereafter, Mom started at the other classical station, the completely automated KDFC. In fact, Mom was the first actual live human they ever had on the air. Amazingly, she's been at KDFC ever since, but the station has gone through many changes, including quite a few different owners. After Ed Davis, he put the D in KDFC. There was Brown Broadcasting, Infinity, Bonneville, Entercom, and since 2011, KDFC has been a listener-supported station in association with KUSC, which, as we all grew up calling it, University of Spoiled Children, until they started to pay her salary. It's always been classical for Mom, really just by serendipity, but it's turned out to be a really nice niche, lasting 36 years and counting. On a personal note, growing up with Diane Nicolini as my mother has been a true blessing. Family has and will always be her first priority, but she also has been a true role model for me and has demonstrated how a strong, independent woman can not only be the best mother and wife, but kick ass in the workplace. Every day I try my best to emulate her in both my professional and personal life. I am so proud of her. I love her more than anything else in the world, and congratulate her on this milestone.
So much, Monica. I'm so proud of you. And she got through this entire afternoon with no alcohol. Amazing. I'm going to make it really quick. I was going to recite the complete works of Shakespeare, but I'm going to spare you. Just want to say that I'm so humbled and honored to be in the company of the folks that are already in the Hall of Fame, the people that are here, and it's great to see everybody, and some old-timers like Lon Simmons and Dr. Don Rose and Tommy Saunders. Where are you, Tommy? Right here. Yeah, and you know, we have the honor of broadcasting live every day from the Tommy Saunders studio. It's a long story, but yeah. Of course it is. The sign is still there. We would not touch it. It's fantastic. I want to thank Hoyt. This is such, we've used the word tickled. We're so tickled to be inducted into the Hall of Fame at the same time. Hoyt's my dear friend. He's an inspiration to me every day. He turns on the microphone and it is radio magic. He makes that connection, and I'm always striving to be just like you. And Hoyt and I just got back from this vacation together, so I'm not really sure if we're still friends. What?
With our spouses.
No, our spouses, it was 8 of our best friends, were on this little boat, and we're on the Dalmatian coast, and it was really nice. The boat was a little rustic, and I did acquire a nickname through the course of the vacation. La Principessa. So I don't know if we're still friends, but welcome back. And I want to thank Bill Luth, who has made me the announcer that I am today, because he was able to convince me that I didn't have to be the tasteful lady on the radio. That just because it was classical music, I could just be myself. And it was the greatest lesson. Thank you so much. Every day has been so much fun. The last 5 years have been the best 5 years of my career, and I want it to just go on and on and on. And yeah, so I hope this isn't like the beginning of the end or anything, because I hope to never retire. And finally, I just want to thank my lovely husband, Jim Hansen, who's always been so supportive. He always said, you know, you do something and you know you really kind of screwed it up or it just wasn't that good. And he'd say, you did great. You did great. You did great. Even if he's lying, you always have to have someone in your life that is your go-to person that you can depend on to say, you did great. So thank you, honey. Mwah. Thanks, everybody. One of the best of Marcy's Dirty Wine.
Lynn does that so well. Thank you for joining us today. Special thanks to the nice people here at the Basque Cultural Center for everything they've done to make our day a success. The Legends Next Extravaganza will be our annual holiday show right here at the BCC on December 16th. Our old friend Elvis will be in the building with his friends, as will a Patat, and the Legends old-time players will recreate an intriguing 1947 edition of The Whistler. It's a program that aired the night before Christmas Eve. You will not want to miss it. It's a great show. Leave your name tags at the front door. If you insist on paying for parking, give it to Mr. Compton in the back. And all of you recipients, they'd like you over here by the portraits that are on the wall. Drive carefully going home, everybody.